Hey everyone, Patrick CK here. I've been getting a bunch of comments asking me to take a look at the Mangoal OEM-Style Dash Cam. If you're not familiar with these kinds of dash cams, they tuck up behind your rear view mirror and look like they rolled off the factory line with the car. Mangoal reached out about doing a review, and it felt like the perfect opportunity to finally dig in. Quick bit of transparency, Mangoal reached out and provided this unit for review. What they did not do is pay for a positive review or get any say over what I'm about to tell you. They don't see the video before it goes live. Everything here is my own take. As always, no free passes. I did something on this one that I don't always get to do. I took it apart. What I found inside genuinely changes how I feel about this dash cam. We'll get to that in a bit. Let's talk about why you'd want one of these over a normal dash cam. The whole pitch is that it disappears. It sits right up next to the mirror. It's powered from the car's own internal wiring, so no cable management. That's great for theft, or if you just hate the look of gear stuck to your windshield, and it makes for a clean, resale-ready interior. The trade-off is fitment. These aren't universal. This exact model is cut specifically for the Toyota Corolla Gen 2 E210, model years 23 through 26. Mangoal is very clear that it does not fit older or newer Corollas, nor the Corolla Cross. So before you even think about buying one, check the model, year, trim, and even the shape of the stock shroud. Let's see what you actually get. On top, we get the instructions for how to use the app. We'll set the main unit aside for a second. Next up is the rear camera with its own proprietary connection, a pretty basic chassis, nothing too special to see here. Then the GPS unit, also with its own proprietary connection. Next is the piece that makes this whole thing possible, the power adapter that splits power off the lane assist system to run the camera. Then a standard trim removal tool. They also included a 128 gig micro SD card. And I like that this one isn't custom branded. It's a Kioxia, a trusted name, and I'll come back to whether it holds up later. And then something you just don't see anymore, a full color, full featured owner's manual. That one actually surprised me because it's not cheap to print these things. Now back to the unit itself. It feels nice and solid, not much flex for the size. The design is very minimalist. All you get is 2 buttons, 3 LEDs, and a slot for the micro SD card. On the front of the hump, we have our main camera. Flip it over and we have a variety of cables, all nicely labeled for power, the rear camera, and GPS. This unit also comes with its own red clips that hold it in place. Some cameras in this category make you migrate your stock clips out of the original shroud. This saves that sometimes annoying step. Overall, it feels like a well put together piece of hardware. Nothing about it feels cheap. The panels line up perfectly, no creaks, no gaps. It's just a well molded piece of plastic. Basically OEM quality. We'll see how it fares once we install it. The standout is that separate GPS unit. If you want to use it, the instructions have you cable managing it all the way down to your dashboard. Feels a little odd since there's a ton of space inside the shroud where this could possibly fit. Kinda defeats the purpose of the whole clean install for this and the rear camera. Okay, spec sheet. Let's cut through the standard marketing and look at what this hardware is actually delivering. The front camera is advertised as 4K. That's 3840 by 2160. Rear is 1080. Front lens is a wide 170 degrees. Rear is 140. Built-in Wi-Fi, a companion app, loop recording, and a G sensor that locks a clip when it detects an impact, so it doesn't get overwritten. On the inside, it's running a Sony IMX335 image sensor and a Novatec NT96670 processor. Recording in H.264 or H.265 and saving everything as a TS video file. Operating range is quoted at -4 Fahrenheit or -20 C. up to 158 Fahrenheit or 70 C. Now here's the part where the marketing and the hardware don't quite line up. That Sony IMX335 is a 5.14 megapixel sensor, and real true 4K needs about 8.3 megapixels to fill every single pixel natively. So the sensor physically cannot capture a native 4K image. That means the 4K being saved is interpolated. The camera captures at the sensor's real resolution, then the processor scales that image up to a 4K sized file. You get a 4K file, but you're not getting 4K worth of real detail. I'm not saying that to trash it. Plenty of cameras in this price range do exactly this. But when the box says 4K, I think you deserve to know whether that's 8 million real pixels or 5 million stretched to fit. Now I did pull the actual files off the card and read what the camera is really writing. The files are 3840 by 2160 running at 30 frames per second, but there's the bitrate, and that comes in at only 18.6 megabits per second. For a 4K frame, that's not a lot of data. Bitrate is basically how much information a camera allows itself to describe each second of video. And spreading out across a frame that size, every pixel ends up with a pretty thin slice of it. For a sense of scale, my Samsung Galaxy records 4K at almost 30 megabits per second, and my Canon R7 pushes past 60. To be fair, a dashcam has reasons to run leaner than a real camera. It's writing non-stop in the heat to a card it's trying not to kill. But this thing is spending less than half of what a phone spends on the same size frame. I checked clip after clip, daytime, nighttime, empty highway, busy intersections, and it's 18.6 every single time. So this camera spends exactly the same amount of data on a blank stretch of road as it does on a street packed with detail. It can't spend more when the scene gets harder. This is the part I teased earlier. I opened the housing up because I wanted to know one specific thing. Does this have a supercapacitor or a rechargeable battery? It's pretty easy to take apart. A few screws and the panel pops right off. What I've found is a small rechargeable coin cell, a Panasonic ML1220. A coin cell that's this tiny isn't a power buffer. It's just there to keep the clock and the date running while the camera is unplugged, which means there's no supercapacitor in this unit. That matters for two reasons: heat and lifespan. A rechargeable coin cell baking in your car all summer is rated for a lower temperature ceiling than a supercapacitor. I live in the South, where highs can be over 100 Fahrenheit or 38 C for multiple days in a row. A rechargeable battery can wear out over a couple of those hot summers, while a supercap basically shrugs it off. Once we get it installed, we'll see just how hot it actually gets thanks to my new thermal camera. Fortunately, it's not all bad news. The recording format is TS or transport stream, and that's a smart choice for exactly this situation. A TS file doesn't have to write a closing index, so there's nothing to finalize. Whatever made it onto the card is already valid and playable up to the second the power cuts off. Let's go through the installation. First, removing the little panel on the back of the stock shroud. The instructions say to use the trim removal tool. Don't bother. I found that completely ineffective. I just held the main unit with one hand and popped the panel off with the other. Next, you slide the shroud down. It comes off parallel with the windshield. The first time takes more force than you'd expect, so be patient and try not to rip off your mirror while you're at it. With the vehicle off, unplug the lane assist power plug and put our adapter in between. The adapter goes into the lane assist module. Then hold the new shroud up, plug the 3-pin connector into it, and slide it into place parallel with the windshield, the same way the old one came off. You may have to juggle the wires around, but it should snap right in. Now, if you're not running the rear camera or the GPS, you're basically done. Tuck those spare cables up into the shroud, pop the new little panel on, slide in the SD card, and that's it. If you are using the GPS, the instructions have you wiring it down to your dash, again defeating the clean look. Instead, I stuck it directly next to the body and tucked the slack into the void of the shroud. We'll see later that it still gets signal just fine. The rear camera plugs into the corresponding labeled wire, then tucks up into your headliner. On most cars, you just push it over the edge and it slides in and disappears. After that, the routing is unique to every car. In mine, I go down the A-pillar, then under the kick panels, all the way to the back. These cable clips make routing much easier. Links below. The main unit ran me about 10 minutes, another 10 minutes for the rear camera, and most of that is fussing with the cable routing, so call it 20 minutes for the whole thing. Not bad. When you turn the car on, it powers up automatically with a little voice confirmation, which, it turns out, also plays when there's no SD card installed. I forgot to put mine back in once, and it still cheerfully told me it was recording. Thanks for that. Let's get it talking to a phone. You connect to it via its always-on Wi-Fi and run the SkyCam app that you can download from your respective app store. Find the broadcasted Wi-Fi network and punch in the default code of 123456778. Just remember that when you're connected to the Mangoal Wi-Fi network, you do not have any other signal, mobile or otherwise. You are disconnected from the world. You get your live feed right away. We can see the GPS signal is fine as is. We're going to pop into the settings and change the one setting that annoys me the most. The loop recording duration is now set to the max of 3 minutes. We'll leave everything else on default for now. Back in the teardown, I said we'd find out how hot this thing actually gets, and it's worse than I expected. I've been watching this unit with my thermal camera, and on a mild day, the card area sat around 140 Fahrenheit or 60 C. Warm, but inside the envelope. Then we got a real summer day. 95 Fahrenheit or 35 C outside, and the hottest spot on the housing was directly on the card slot, coming in at 163.9 Fahrenheit or 73 C. Mangoal's own spec sheet caps this camera's operating range at 158 Fahrenheit or 70 C. So on an ordinary southern summer day, this camera is running hotter than its own manufacturer says it's allowed to get. I took that reading sitting in my driveway with the AC running at 76 Fahrenheit, 24 C. The cabin was comfortable, but since the camera lives up behind the mirror, pressed against the sun-soaked glass, the AC can never really reach it. Heat is the #1 killer of flash storage and small batteries, and this unit concentrates its heat on exactly those two components. That's not a today problem, that's a how long does this thing last problem. While we can't control the coin cell, we can control the other heat killer, the SD card, and that one I can actually test now. I've been building a test bench for memory cards. I call it CKBench. Other than heat, loop recording is what actually kills cards. It's constant, scattered overwriting. The test runs 3 back-to-back passes for exactly that workload. My reference card, an unbranded Class 4, dropped 71% by the 3rd pass. This Kioxia, no measurable fade at all. I also wrote to every available byte on the card and read it all back. 0 mismatches, 0 read errors. And its worst 10 seconds of sustained writing was nearly 17 times what this camera actually asked for. So credit where it's due. Mangoal didn't cheap out here. The card is not the weak link in this kit. That's why my usual advice changes a little with this one. I'm not telling you to replace this card, but if you live somewhere hot and you want some margin or want more than 10 hours before it starts overwriting itself, this camera supports up to 256 gigs and a high endurance card is good insurance. Link below. Now the part that decides everything. We already know this is upscaled 4K off a 5 megapixel sensor. So the question is how much real detail actually makes it to the file. Initial impressions are not bad. The wide dynamic range, and note that's WDR, not HDR, is good. We can see into the shadows and the sky isn't completely blown out. Looking at the full image, it's serviceable. As we push into the frames, we are seeing some processing, some haloing, and artifacts around the edges of trees and power lines. It's not as bad as I've seen in other cameras, but again, this is a consequence of upscaling and the additional processing on top. Zooming in on a tree and looking at the real pixels, the leaves stop being leaves. There's no individual leaf edge anywhere in there. It's just soft green blobs. And the trunk edges smear instead of holding a line. That isn't a lens or sensor issue. That's an encoder running out of data and giving up on detail. And dense foliage is the worst case for it, because leaves are basically thousands of tiny, high contrast edges all moving at once. That's the single most expensive thing you can ask a video encoder to describe. With a fixed bitrate budget that can't grow, something has to give, and that's fine detail. So here's the honest read on daytime. Wide shot, it looks fine. If you need to show what happened, who was where, which lane everyone was in, this footage does that well. But the moment you need to zoom in and pull a detail out of it, don't expect much. Same goes for the rear camera. I haven't talked about it much because it's just an off-the-shelf rear camera. The quality is not very good. It is just serviceable. You also really want a CPL filter for these kinds of harsh, sunny scenarios, which is sold separately. Now for my standard license plate readability test. I set a plate up on a stand and move it back in roughly 5 feet increments until the characters are no longer readable. Right in front of the car, which I'll call 5 feet, we get nice, clear readability. No problem going out to 10 feet. Still looking pretty good. I can read the plate just fine. At 15, we're losing a little detail, but we can still make out what it says. At 20, we start losing the plot. Unless you already know what the plate says, you're not going to be making that out. Beyond that, it's a total blur. I do have to be upfront though. These are about as close to perfect conditions as it gets. The plate isn't moving, there's no traffic, and nothing is coming at me at 45 miles an hour. Now, the same test in the dark. At 5 feet, clear enough. I can read it without having to work for it. But by 15 feet, we're already in trouble. I can barely make it out, and if I didn't already know what the plate said, I don't think I'd get there. So compare that to the daytime, where 15 feet was still legible and 20 feet was the wall. At night, the whole thing collapses noticeably earlier. There is a flaw in my test. I kept the plate above my headlight beam. That kept the plate from getting blasted with light. Depending on what vehicle you drive, your headlights could be higher or lower. My own test was too kind to this camera. The road proved it. We'll see a real example shortly. Mangoal says WDR here is a mix of hardware and software, and night is exactly what wide dynamic range is supposed to be for. So let's see how it does. I'll start with what works, because it isn't all bad. Statically lit stuff holds up better than I expected. Street signs, storefront signs, traffic lights, I can read all of them without trouble. So if what you need is to establish where you were, this footage does the job fine. But let's look elsewhere. The shadows aren't dark, they're gone. Off the side of the road, it's a black wall. Anything outside the reach of my headlights essentially doesn't exist in this file. No amount of enhancing will fix that. Then there's the bloom. Every street light turns into a starburst, and the brake lights ahead of me swell up and bleed into everything around them. Oncoming traffic is just as bad. Those headlights bloom into a solid white mass, and for as long as that car is passing, anything on the side of the road is simply gone. Remember my plate test, where I kept the plate up above the headlight beam? Here's what happens when I don't get to control that. That car is stopped dead in front of me, and I cannot read that plate. It's a white rectangle. There are no characters in it at all. Same story for the car in the next lane over. And here's the part that's the opposite of what you'd assume. It's not a resolution problem, it's an exposure problem. The camera opens itself up to see a dark scene, then that plate comes back at it like a mirror, and everything on it gets crushed up against pure white. This is the textbook case for wide dynamic range, and the hybrid hardware and software WDR on this camera is not solving it. Now the rear camera at night, and I'm just going to be blunt. It's a blur. The lights blow out, there's basically no detail left in the frame, and it's messy in a way the front camera never quite gets to. And the file sizes back that up. Every rear clip I shot at night lands right around 6.9 megabits per second, the absolute bottom of the range. In daylight, the same camera climbs past 11. Some of that is just physics, but either way, at night the rear camera is spending the least data it ever spends on the hardest scene it ever has to describe. But before you write it off completely though, and I don't think you should, be clear about what it's actually there to do. That rear footage is not going to identify anybody. But if someone rear ends you, a blurry recording of a truck is still a recording of a truck hitting you. It establishes that it happened and roughly how. So everything we've looked at so far has been in 4K. That's how this thing ships and how most people are going to run it. But before we call it, I want to try one more thing. There are actually 3 modes on this thing: 4K, 2K, and 1080p. And I tested all of them. Here's what no one mentions. This sensor is 2592 pixels across. 2K is 2560. That's a 99% match, which means 2K is the one setting where this camera just reads its sensor out and writes down what it sees. Nothing invented, nothing thrown away. The bit rates go 18.6 megabits for 4K, 14.9 for 2K, and 10.2 for 1080p. 1080p is the easy call. It loses outright. Shrink the 4K down to 1080 and it still carries about 3 times the fine detail as 1080p does. But 4K versus 2K is where we need to take pause. Check this out. Same sign, same orientation, and I'm stopped in both of these. No motion blur to argue about. Look at the letter edges. The 2K is hard and clean. The 4K is softer, and there's a glow running along the top border that the 2K just doesn't have. Which makes sense, because 4K is getting hurt twice. Upscaling 2592 up to 3840 smears every hard edge into a gradient before compression even starts. And then 4K is the worst fed mode on the camera. This is me looking at footage, not quoting you a hard number. So judge for yourself. But my call is 2K. It's native, it's cleaner where it counts, plus it gives you 25% more recording time. And no, none of this fixes the night plates. That's exposure, not resolution. So, $250. Where does that leave us? You're buying the way this thing disappears into your car. That is the product. The kit is complete. The build quality is genuinely OEM grade, and from the driver's seat it looks like it came with the car. On that promise, it delivers completely. What you're not buying is great video. This footage is not terrible, it's just not good. During the day, the wide shot is perfectly serviceable. If what you need is to show what happened, who was where, and which lane everyone was in, it does that fine. Some frames look better than other dash cams I've seen. Some frames look worse. That's the range you're operating in. And at night, it gets worse in the way that matters most, because a plate sitting completely still in front of me came back as a white rectangle. The rear camera at night is a blur. I'd still run it though, because even a bad camera back there beats no camera at all. Is it perfect? No. Is it bad? Also no. It's a stealth product with acceptable video attached. And how you feel about that comes down to which of those two you care about more. I've deliberately put a lot of raw footage in this video, day and night, so you don't have to take my word on any of it. Bottom line, buy this one for how it disappears, not for how it records. As always, I'll leave links to everything in the description. If you enjoyed this content, like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, this has been Patrick CK. Goodbye.